Hello and welcome to Narrowcast Boxing. It's June 19th, 2019. In this episode, I'm going to briefly discuss a few fights which are taking place this upcoming weekend. I have to be honest here, I'm not really looking forward to anything in particular. There's no fights I'm going to recommend, but I will inform you of some anyways. I'd like to start with Andrew Cancio versus Alberto Machado. This is allegedly for a world title at 130 pounds, but I'll get into that more in a minute. This fight is a rematch. In the first fight, Cancio stopped Machado in the fourth round. I didn't watch that fight the first time around. I've never heard of Cancio prior to that fight, and I've never really rated Machado. I may or may not watch this. I'd like to see if Cancio is any good, but with 4 losses in 26 fights, I'm pretty skeptical. I mentioned this allegedly is for a world title because it's the regular version of the actual world title that Gervonta Davis holds, but I guess the regular world title counts as a legitimate world title. This is why I usually don't bother mentioning sanctioning bodies in these videos. I just say that it's for a world title at whatever weight. It's honestly too confusing otherwise. As someone who watches boxing practically every weekend, I honestly can't make sense of this, and I've pretty much just stopped trying. So I've just decided that whoever is being labeled a world champion is, and I'm not going to bother with further distinctions. Regardless, whoever wins this Cancio versus Machado fight may be in line to fight Gervonta Davis at some point in the future, and I'd be looking forward to that. Moving on, we have Guillermo versus Julio Ceja. Rigondeaux is a personal favorite fighter of mine, which is why I mentioned this fight, but don't feel like you have to watch this. He's considered by many to be a very boring fighter, which is understandable. I personally really like his style, and his technique is very pleasing to my eyes. This should be a victory for him. Ceja is not a quality fighter. This looks to be a further attempt to rebuild Rigondeaux after his loss to Vasyl Lomachenko. One thing I will say is that time is really running out for Rigondeaux. He's going to be 39 years old in a few months, which is very old for a boxer in general, much more so for a fighter at 122 or 126 pounds. I'd like to see him get back in the world title picture and redeem the loss that he has. This fight is on the undercard of the next fight, which I'll mention. That fight is Jermell Charlo versus Jorge Cota. I'm going to predict a knockout victory for Charlo, who was originally supposed to rematch Tony Harrison for the world title at 154 pounds, which he lost in their first fight. Jorge Cota is a late replacement, and if you're not on the Charlo brothers level, then they will likely knock you out. They tend to look for knockouts, and I see that happening in this fight. This is essentially a tune-up fight, so once again, don't feel bad if you miss this one. Anyway, that's it for this week's previews. Not a lot going on, unfortunately, but there are a few fights of some note. Like I said earlier, if you don't bother watching any of these, I'll inform you of the results next week. As always, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll talk to you then.